Morning, everyone. My name is Tony Alford with Aikens IT, and I specialize in private public cloud infrastructure. Today's webinar is called Don't Lose All Your Data, the Business Continuity Crisis, and will be broken down into two parts. First, we'll be covering backup, and part two at 10:30 we'll cover disaster recovery. Part one, backup. Malicious actors on the internet are currently taking advantage of the financial and wellness insecurity that came with COVID-19. We're seeing a 148% increase in ransomware, malware, and data exfiltration attacks during COVID, making these types of attacks more common than ever before. And it's costing businesses nearly $4 million on average to recover from an attack. Data loss of any kind costs US businesses about $8,000 per minute, and recovering from large-scale data loss is costing $15.6 million on the high end of the average financial loss. However, ransomware and malware are not the only threats to your data. There are threats which you cannot protect yourself against without backup and disaster recovery. Human error, for example, is the #1 cause of service interruption, with server, storage, and power failure following it. So what can you do to protect your environment from data loss? Implementing a backup solution, which will process and store copies of your data so you can restore it after a data loss event, is one of the best ways to protect yourself against data loss. Private cloud backups are processed and stored on your data center's infrastructure. Because the restore points are local to your environment, when you want to restore data from on-prem, it's going to be much faster than trying to restore data from a public cloud. But restoration from a private cloud backup to a cloud provider will take longer. Private cloud backups also require a large amount of free storage and a powerful internal networking environment to perform consistently and efficiently. With public cloud backups, the backups for on-prem VMs are processed on-prem and offloaded into a cloud provider storage account. Or if you're backing up a cloud VM, then it is processed and stored in the cloud provider storage. Public cloud backups require little to no on-site storage infrastructure. You can configure them to have geo-redundant protection against ransomware and are largely unaffected by a loss of backup infrastructure. However, there are additional costs associated with storing and processing your data in the cloud, and restoration outside of the cloud provider's workload will take longer than private cloud. RPOs and RTOs are some measurables used to qualify the quality of your backup and disaster recovery solutions. Your RPO or recovery point objective is the age of the most recent recovery point. For example, if your most recent recovery point was at midnight and it's noon the next day, your RPO is 12 hours. For recovery time objective, or RTO, it's the amount of time between your service disruption and your workload being restored and running. So if you have a power outage in the data center at noon and you're back up at 2 p.m., your RTO is 2 hours. Rule of 3-2-1, it's a minimum requirement recommendation for your business continuity plan. It consists of storing at least 3 copies of your data, 2 forms of backup media, and 1 backup copy off-site. So an example would be, I'm backing up a VM every day for 3 days, creating a backup copy of the backup data, and then storing either those backups or the copies in the cloud. This is going to ensure that that protected VM is resilient against common scenarios that would render the backup solution useless, such as a loss of data center storage equipment that the backup data is stored on, or a backup chain being corrupted with no copy to use as a substitute. Today we're going to be discussing Microsoft Azure Backup and Veeam Backup. Azure Backup is a public cloud backup provider. You can configure your backups to occur as often as daily and can also configure weekly, monthly, and yearly restore points. You can use it to back up your on-prem or Azure VMs. The Data Protection Manager is a utility used by Microsoft to process and offload on-prem data backups. It stores a short-term recovery point in your data center, and any restore points that fall outside of the retention range you set will be offloaded into a recovery services vault in Azure. It can also restore a SQL VM to an IaaS database, reducing the amount of overhead needed when restoring SQL. Can be configured to store restore points in another part of the country also, so that your data can be restored even if all of your IT infrastructure was destroyed tomorrow. I'm now going to demonstrate the process of creating a recovery services vault, configuring the backup policy, and adding protection to an Azure VM. So this is the recovery services vault dashboard in Azure. I'm going to select add from the blade above, set my desired resource group, my vault name, my region. I'm going to leave the region as US West 2 and click next. And I'm going to set a tag on here so that in the future, if I have a large amount of recovery services vaults, I can scale this out so that I know what each one is without having to do a deep investigation on it. So I'm going to click create and look at the deployment in the upper right hand. When this resource is deployed, I'll go in there and let's modify the backup policy. I'm going to be modifying the default policy. I'm going to configure it to take a daily snapshot at 1 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I'll configure 3 days of instant recovery snapshots. For the backup policy retention range, I'm going to set 30 days for the daily backups. For my monthly restore points, we can do 12 months. That way we have a restore point for every month in the past year. And then we'll also configure 3 years of yearly backups. So we have a restore point for January 1st for the past 3 years. Save that. Now, under associated items, you'll notice there's no actual VM attached to this. So this isn't backing anything up right now. But when we add the protection to our VM later on, all of this is already configured and ready to go. So I'm going to go to the resource group, and on the top blade, or I'm going to select my recovery services vault, and on the top blade, click plus backup. I'm targeting the Azure VM, ensuring that the information for my retention policy is correct, and selecting the VM I want to protect. It's deploying now, and once it's deployed, we go here in the dashboard of our recovery services vault, and then I'll refresh whenever the deployment's done. And now we can see that that item is protected and it's pending its initial backup. So to conclude, cyber attacks, as stated before, are at an all-time peak during COVID-19, 148% increase. Ask yourself how backup plays a role in your business's continuity plan. Do you have backup? Is it configured correctly? Are you following the rule of 3-2-1? If it's been a while since you've assessed your business continuity plan, this could be a call to action for you to take a step back and make sure all your information is still relevant. We offer a managed backup as a service in these bundles that we'll customize to your business. Please reach out if you'd like to discuss any of these bundles to harden your business continuity plan.